Hopping on now.
Here's your pal Jane, Chris, from
Yeah.
what was
Hi,
the name of
Jane.
that mystery bookshop?
Mystery to me.
Mute me.
So do you want to do a little soft shoe number or shuffle off the buffalo?
Just with my head.
Jeff will.
That's my motto. Jeff will.
All right, I think I'm gonna get started at least on the preamble that we have for you. So I'm Chris Conti. We're all of us are new here. I started in February. I sell to the Midwest, and Julia Callahan is our Western States rep. She started in May, and Jeff Waxman is our Eastern Seaboard and Alabama. And he started in March. And Margaret has been here several months before us, getting all of us in order, and takes care of us every day. And we like to call her our money penny sometimes. And let's see. So thanks for joining us tonight. This is the first time that we've done this sort of blanket Zoom call with everybody who is able to join. So thanks a lot for showing up. We wanted to just say too that we might go a little long, and I don't expect you to stay the entire way through unless you're having a good time and learning about a bunch of books, which I think that you will do if you hang in there. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about first is a program that we started when we all first came on board. You know, it's our 50th anniversary. And we are the first field reps selling just to indies in our 50-year history, which we're really excited about. And to celebrate our 50th anniversary, we came up with this top shelf program, of which we've signed up about 15 stores, ranging from books in Florida, novel in Memphis. Help me out, guys. Who am I forgetting?
Newtonville Books in Massachusetts.
Julia.
Page
Romans?
158 in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Village Books in Bellingham, Washington.
Awesome. Cavalier House in Louisiana. So yeah, and what the top shelf program is each season we select 25 titles across kind of everything that we do. So there's nonfiction, there's fiction, there's kids books, there's adult books, there's illustrated books, there's usually some kind of cookbook, and we consider it to be the best of indie publishing. And in exchange, the program offers an extra 5% discount, free freight, extended terms, and free returns at the end of the season for what has not sold.
And we'll send you a call tag.
We'll send you a call tag for what hasn't sold in exchange for you bringing in 3 of each of the 25 titles. I think everybody that we signed up took titles beyond those 25, but we sort of feel like if that's all that you have the bandwidth for, that you're really representing what's going on in independent publishing in your stores. And some of the reason for the 3 quantity is that we then know that you're going to make a display with these books. They won't just get spined out and shelved and not seen. And, you know, I found in my history of selling that when we only see stores a couple times a year, and then we kind of follow up and see how the season went for everyone, you know, they look at their numbers and they're like, oh yeah, we sold those. And there's kind of no telling how quickly they sold. They could have sold the very first week that you got them in, and maybe you don't do enough business with IPG. And so this is a really good way to make sure that you've got enough for all of the publicity that we think these titles are going to get, and the demand from you know, and visibility and demand that we think that you're going to see for these titles. And it really takes the risk out of it. So because that's everything that we've heard from most people, is that, you know, it's hard to give the shelf space to titles that might not be on the bestsellers list. And so we tried to make it easy for you and kind of low risk. So we're going to start tonight's presentation with the top shelf titles, the 25 titles that we think are going to have the most legs. And this is an ongoing program that you can join at any time. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to send you that sheet that we were just looking at, as well as we also have a holiday titles list that we sent out in our newsletter. So if there's any last minute sort of stocking up for the holidays that needs to be done, please reach out to us. In fact, we now have all of your emails, so we will probably just follow up with that. And then also we have Chicago Review Press has put together a pretty great white sale with discounts up to 70% on a lot of their titles. So we'll also include that as well. So, and then I think lastly, before we get started, keep December 6th in mind. We're going to do a similar thing as tonight, but it's going to be more of just a kind of holiday party with 4 of our authors that we like a whole bunch, 2 from Santa Fe Writers Project, and 2 from CRP, the authors of our Brewhouse and A Woman's Places in the Brewhouse, 2 similar sounding titles that have come out this fall and are already doing super well. So, okay, let's have a look at our spring 22 list. And as I said, we're going to be starting with the top shelf. So the first 25 titles are going to be the top shelf. So the first one is Letters to Change the World. It's from Ebury Press, and it's a collection of letters from political activists 19th to the 21st century. I think that this is a pretty unique, I haven't seen this title before. Most books of letters that I've seen have been correspondence between sort of two writers or 2 particular people. And this one is kind of all over the place. But big, you know, the big names, Lincoln, George Orwell, Martin Luther King. So I think it's a really smart gift and kind of a good encyclopedia reference book.
All right. Overdue addresses the growing role of librarians as frontline social workers and pressed into service to populations they were never trained to handle. We're talking about the homeless, mentally ill, people addicted to drugs. And with specific reference to the library system in Washington, D.C., this book highlights our national willingness to let libraries bear the brunt of these huge public health failures, and asks the most difficult question for librarians: what does the future of libraries look like in the United States?
Okay, the next one is Fearless Heart, an illustrated biography of Syria Bonaly. If you, like me, watch with bated breath every Olympics, Winter Olympics. The figure skating, you might remember Sergio Bonaly. Her big year was 1994, the Lillehammer Olympics, which got a little bit overshadowed by Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan. But I used to love watching her. She would do backflips. She would like do all this amazing, amazing stuff. And of course, the International Olympic Committee didn't really love that. There was racism involved. There was, sort of, they didn't like these kind of more muscly women like Tanya Harding, like Sergio Bonaly. They wanted those like stick thin ladies. And this is sort of her biography of being an Olympic skater at the time, what she was up against. I think it's a great book for kids to teach them about a great figure skater. There's also like, go look on YouTube, her videos of doing backflips. It's just like the most incredible thing ever. So I love this one.
This one is me, The Windowsill Gardener. This book is kind of a great combination of actually extremely cute. The illustrations are unique. They're also educational, informative, and it's just a very useful book. A lot of people have obviously picked up gardening hobbies over quarantine. And this book illustrates both how to take care of certain plants, what those plants will look like, and frugal tips so that you don't find yourself getting duped into spending a lot of money on potters that you don't really need. Basically just some good 101 tips for home gardening.
Embrace the work, love your career. I'm holding the little blad right now. Is from Fran Hauser, who is the best-selling author of The Myth of the Nice Girl. This is sort of an activity workbook, guided activity and workbook for women who have come to a crossroads in their career and are looking kind of to move on to the next chapter. This book's seems really great for if any of you do offsite events with women's boards or those sorts of offsite events. Could be good for that, to recommend this title for that.
This one is me again, Unicorns, Myths, and Monsters. This title received kind of immediate oohs and ahs from the whole sales team when it was first presented to us. It features 8 new stories on some of the most beloved and mythologized legendary creatures that pop up time and again across cultures and folklores. The stories are accompanied by gorgeously illustrated infographics. One, for example, showcases the 8 enchanting unicorn families, and another diagrams the characteristics of the phoenix, the fiery breath, blazing feathers, and killer talons. This one is also me. The Owl House is the story of Luz Noceda, a Dominican-American teen girl who stumbles through a portal into another world where witches and friendly demons are commonplace. Luz is compelled by this new world's magic, and despite not actually being a witch herself, is determined to pick up some magical abilities. The corresponding show by the same name was greenlighted last May for a 3rd season and is highly acclaimed by both critics and audiences. Fans have expressed appreciation for its inclusion of LGBTQ+ characters. And lastly, the series won a 2021 Children's and Youth Programming Peabody.
All right, the next book is Come As You Are. It's a novel by Jennifer Haupt. And as you might be able to tell from the cover and the title, it is based in Seattle in the 1990s. It's about 2 teenagers who get pregnant, and they have to learn how to be parents. They sort of fall apart and come back together for the sake of their child. It's a great coming of age novel, and of course takes place against the background of Seattle in the 90s. So good for people, I don't know, my age that have a deep nostalgia for that, even though they never lived in Seattle in the 90s.
Next one is Uology, which is from American Academy of Pediatrics. They do a couple titles each season, and they're always kind of some of our bigger titles. They do so well because the name American Academy of Pediatrics, I think, resonates with book buyers. They're seen as kind of the expert on the subject. And the title Uology is sort of a play on Girlology and the Care and Keeping of You sort of books. And they wanted to kind of shake up the gendering that goes on in those books, and sort of keeping information from one group or another. And because, in 21st century puberty books need to address a larger range of gender identities, and that's what this book sets out to do. Both sort of inform everybody about everybody's experience, and kind of open that conversation up more than it has in the past.
The setup, there isn't much like this in the world. This is a 1928 poem about a black boxer in a mobbed up sport from one of the writers who shaped both The New Yorker as managing editor in its early days and wrote some of the screenplays for some of the early films of Howard Hughes, and it's set to some outstanding new illustrations. The story is a different, grittier America than we encounter elsewhere. It's one that inspired like 100 years of noir film, graphic books by people like Darwin Cook and Frank Miller, endless reprints of dime store crime novels that are now coming out from like NYRB and Hard Case Crime. This is some classic Americana with new illustrations, and it's very true to its roots and extremely appealing to me. We've also got The Watchers. This is a debut novel, Irish horror with references to folklore and mythology throughout. It's more on the spooky side of things, though not particularly gory. And it's already getting a lot of love from booksellers in Massachusetts. I know that at Trident and Eight Cousins, there's some fans of this one. And pretty ideal for maybe fans of a ton of French.
All right, Queer Life, Queer Love. The editors of this collection lost a trans family member, and on the Trans Day of Remembrance, put a call out for writing from queer people of all varieties. These are the 25 top stories. They're nonfiction pieces, they're flash fiction, they're poetry, and they're all the winning entries from this international competition on queer that they put together on queer writing. It's just a sample of some of the best queer writing today, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
Release the Beast. This is a queer self-help manifesto from the UK's biggest drag queen, a star of RuPaul's show in the UK. And if you had an audience for RuPaul's book or Jonathan Van Ness's book, but specifically not Antony's book, this will probably suit your customers very well. A huge star in the drag scene. I've also got The Future of You. At some point, I read something about that William Gibson said, where he stopped writing about, an alienated future when the present kind of caught up with his vision of what that might be. And that was more than a decade ago. And futurists like Tracy Follows might not be as haunted as Gibson is, and certainly not as much as like Jenny Odell or Shoshana Zuboff. But her excitement makes a very good guide, both to the world at hand and the world to come when it comes to identity in the future. So if you sold How to Do Nothing or The Age of Surveillance Capitalism and you want something a little more optimistic, this might fit the bill.
All right, I'm back at the 90s nostalgia. This one for Mugsy. Mugsy Bugs, if you don't know, was a huge basketball star in the 90s, played mostly for the Charlotte Hornets, but also the Golden State Warriors, the Rhode Island Gulls, the Washington Bullets, and the Toronto Raptors. And he is a much loved figure. He was 5'3", or he still is 5'3" tall, and could slam dunk. I just loved watching him play basketball. He was a joy to watch. And this book is a joy to read. It's his memoir. It's a really fascinating and touching memoir about a kid who grew up in the projects and became one of the biggest basketball stars in the world. And I can't recommend it highly enough. He was also in Space Jam. So,
The mark of a true star, right?
Truly.
His talent was stolen by aliens. Under Her Skin is pretty much what the doctor ordered. You know, your poetry sections might have long been the domain of people describing trees or the weathered skin of an old person's hand, or woodworking maybe if they've been reading Robert Haas. But that section has been looking for fresh blood, and this is full of it, full of blood. This is an inclusive poetry collection by cis and trans women and non-binary femmes serving up horror poetry. Number of the authors on this list have Bram Stoker awards. Even more of them have been nominated. This could be a very fun thing to add to your poetry section. Yes, and Aparna. This would be my book to present because I'm the only one on this team who watched this whole show in a weekend. Maybe one sitting. This was a one-sitting situation. I will say that there were some likable figures on this show. There were some irredeemable douchebags as well. And then there was Aparna, who was the most complex character. And this is her taking a little bit of issue with how she was portrayed by the producers and kind of offering an even fuller view of who she might be. She's going to be on the next season. I'm excited. I'll watch that whole thing too. But this is definitely worth having for the many, many fans of Indian matchmaking.
This is the Best of World SF Volume 1. Sorry, also my notes here for a second. Bear with me, thank you. All right, yes, this is Best of World SF award-winning author Lavi Tidar, acts as a sort of tour guide through the anthology's 26 stories. It includes previously published award-winning pieces as well as brand new original stories. The selection spans 23 countries, Cuba, Singapore, Ghana, and Mexico, just to name a few, and features translations from 7 different languages, including Japanese, Chinese, Spanish, Icelandic, and more. It's received a starred review from Booklist, as well as praise from Publishers Weekly and numerous other journals.
I am the sales rep expert in women's bodies, issues, and health. And we know that almost all books are, in fact, purchased and read by women, just all books across the board. And I will say this about this title. What I once wrote on a staff recommendation card for Things We Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl by Jeannie Vanasco that Tin House published a few years ago. This should be required reading for men because men don't know enough about what happens to the people next to us every day in our offices, in our homes, in our streets. And we lazily piece together the female experience from innuendos and HBO shows and even books sometimes. But this is a book that not only gives voice to a lot of different experiences, but really offers the reader a chance to understand things that they can't see themselves. So I hope you'll request a copy, order several copies. Happy to send these out to anybody who's interested.
The Cycling Revolution from Michael O'Mara, UK publisher, is really interesting cycling book that is not so much a how-to or anything to do with being a bike mechanic, but it's really kind of about the freedom you find riding a bicycle. You're going to hear me say a lot during this call that something has gotten much bigger over the pandemic, but I do believe that's true about about cycling. And so, yeah, it talks about the psychological benefits. Cycling as freedom from the 9 to 5. And it's a really great priced little gifty book that I think many people will say, oh, we should get this for so-and-so because he's super into biking.
Like my dad. A paper girl and the knives that made her. I didn't wake up today to cast aspersions on Insta poetry or necessarily to praise it, but I am here to tell you that, like many things born on the internet and committed to paper, Insta poetry sells very well in book form. I can gratefully say that the publishers restrained themselves from comparing this to Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, but Mackenzie Campbell, published by the same press, and her types move a heck of a lot of books for us, just tons of them. And as with my previous title, this Seattle-based poet is sharing something with us that isn't necessarily our own experience. So we should sit up and take notice here.
All right, next up we have A Day at the Gallery, an arty animal search book jam-packed with facts. This was another one that was kind of an instant favorite amongst us in the sales team. It's funny and adorable animal characters act out this art-filled search and find style book. Children and guardians follow penguins, cats, and kangaroos as they move from gallery to search for 80 hidden objects. Along the way, young readers explore and learn about everything from pop art to impressionism to cubism, and often with comical twists to these recognizable art pieces. While it is obviously geared toward a young readership, I think it's one that adults wouldn't even mind reading night after night to their children. This one is also me, Bucharest Dossier. This is, as described, the Born Identity meets John le Carré's The Spy Who Came In from the Cold. It's a definite hit for any spy fiction fan. The title is a realistic display of 1989 Cold War Romania, told from the perspective of CIA analyst and Romanian expat Bill Heflin. As the plot unfolds, Heflin finds himself entangled in political uprising, followed by revolution. Loyalties blur, hearts flicker, and plot twists, as these things tend to go. Lee Child calls this an accomplished debut, a love story inside an espionage thriller, inside a historical record, very impressive and very recommended.
Next is Cold as Hell by Lilia Sergio. If I could say that. First, it's first in a series. She called the Aurora Investigation. She returns to Iceland when her difficult younger sister goes missing. She's a big Nordic crime writer. Her books are international bestsellers, and many of them have been optioned for film. There's this book is already out in the UK, where they had 7,000 pre-orders. And Becky from Beauvoir is a big fan and wrote a blurb about this book.
True facts. Okay, next up we have In Scoring Position, 40 Years of a Baseball Love Affair. This is by Bob Ryan and Bill Chuck. I am a huge baseball fan and I love this book. Bob Ryan scored on the little scorecards every single baseball game he's ever watched. And he was a sports writer for the Boston Globe. So he has watched a lot of baseball, including some huge historical games, some small, not so historical games. And so this is sort of part memoir, part love letter to baseball. And throughout there are photos of the scorecards as he tells you the stories of different games, of like pieces together the story of his life through these different games and through these different experiences. It's something that I would get for any baseball fan in my life and will be requesting copies of for myself because I love it so much. Oh, the next one is Bet My Soul on Rock and Roll by Jean Beauvoir. Jean Beauvoir is a Haitian-American Black punk rock icon. He was in the Plasmatics and Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul. Because the videos for the Disciples of Soul were played on MTV, early on MTV, he was one of the first Black people that was actually on MTV when MTV had a real problem with playing Black people and Black artists. And it's just great stories, encounters with people like Bruce Springsteen and Gene Simmons and Lita Ford and Sylvester Stallone and all sorts of different people, and just a great sort of look through the New York punk rock scene in the 70s and 80s. Teenage punk rock kid Julia would have loved to have read this book when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. Next, we have Prine on Prine, interviews and encounters with John Prine. For my money, John Prine is one of the greatest American songwriters. And he died of COVID very early on in the pandemic. And I think a lot of people are looking for materials on him. For my money, my personal favorite is his duet with Bonnie Raitt doing Angel from Montgomery. If you get a chance to check that one out, it's just, on the right day, it'll make me cry. It's such a great song. And he is such a fascinating artist. Next one, George Harrison on George Harrison. Of course, George Harrison needs no introduction. You know him as from the Beatles. I would argue he is the best Beatles solo career after post-Beatles solo career. I don't know if Jeff's going to agree with me or not.
Jeff
but,
strongly agrees. I strongly agree.
Strongly agrees. Okay, thanks, buddy. So this is another from our musicians in their own words series. And then Rajneeshpuram Inside the Cult of Bhagwan and Its Failed American Utopia. If you, like me, spent an entire Saturday watching Wild Wild Country, you might know about the Rajneesh who took over an Oregon town and tried to create their own city and system of government, and pretty fascinating cult. And I think this book, if you liked that series, this book's going to dig you deeper into what went on, into the Ma Anand Sheila and her complexity. I'm so excited about this one.
A fine line between heroism and villainy, right, Julie?
And then definitely.
Right. Well, there's a handful of different Supreme Court rulings that have really changed the fabric of American life. There's Marbury versus Madison, the Dred Scott decision, which set the stage for the Civil War, Miranda v. Arizona and Roe v. Wade, which established our rights as citizens to remain silent and to our privacy in our medical decisions. And then there's Heart of Atlanta Motel versus United States and Brown v. Board of Education, which were two of the cases that desegregated America after the Civil Rights Bill was passed. Now, Ronnie Green, the author of this book, paid a lot of attention in history class, and then as an investigative reporter, he used original sources and some brand new interviews to resurrect the stories of the people, the Black pastors in particular, who put their bodies in the line, or on the line, to ensure that integration became the law of the land, even in the Deep South.
All right, the next one is Rivals of the Ripper, Unsolved Murders of Women in Late Victorian London. At a certain point in my life, I had read every single book on Jack the Ripper ever written. I don't know that that's still true, but I can't wait for this book. I think it's fascinating to sort of think about a place like Victorian London and the kinds of things that were going on, and why something like Jack the Ripper is the thing that we still remember today, when there were all these other sort of heinous crimes happening at the time. It was a society in flux, much like ours now, and I think it's really a fascinating book that your true crime aficionados will love.
Bracketology came out last year around the beginning of the year in hardcover. Joe Lunardi is a CNN analyst. This book is basically helping you pick your NCAA March Madness brackets. It was very popular in hardcover, and I think it will do even better in paperback.
All right, the next one is Jim Catt, Good as Gold, My 8 Decades in Baseball. And that's a long time to be in baseball, man. He was a pitcher for 25 years at various institutions, probably best well known for the Minnesota Twins, but also played in Chicago, Philadelphia, and New York, and St. Louis. And this is his memoir, is his second memoir. He, after his career, moved to broadcasting for the Yankees and the Twins, and now works for MLB Network. So he's really well known nationally amongst baseball fans. This is definitely one that I think baseball fans will get a real kick out of, particularly in Minnesota and New York, but all over the place. The next one is the first in a series. It's not the first book in the series, but it's a series called Fairlight Moderns. And these are new fiction. They're a little bit smaller, pocket-sized books. I really love these books. They're great new fiction. This particular one, Voting Day, oh, Chris is showing you all the relateds. This particular one, Voting Day, focuses on the day in Switzerland in 1959 where there was a referendum on women's suffrage and men overwhelmingly voted no. So isn't that fun for women? This follows 4 different women on that day and sort of how they intersect and how their lives intersect and how this referendum affects them. And then the next one is also at Fairlight Moderns. We just wanted to give you a little sampling of the different kinds of books that these are. And this one is a magical realism and horror story. It's called A Good Year, and it combines historical fiction with Greek folklore. It's queer. It's very queer themed. The author themselves is queer. And so I think, you know, Fairlight Moderns, what's really cool about these books is that no matter which one you get, there's like something for everyone in this collection. So it's a cool one to have on your shelves.
I will say we're going to be showing you several series that are new to us, and we are always down for a good promotion. If you feel like it's something that you want to represent in your store, we are happy to give you extra discount to bring the full series in sort of a meaningful way and display it. So there's a few others we're going to show you in a bit too.
And if you see any books that you might want to read so that you can sell them a little better, we are very happy to send you a comp copy for your own edification and entertainment.
Almost is from Amy Rao, who's the author of David and Amina, which is a book that was on our top shelf in the spring. And this particular book is Almost is about a teenage daughter who dies suddenly in a car accident, and her father, it focuses on her father sort of unraveling both in the workplace and in his marriage. It takes inspiration from Roland Barthes essays. It's a philosophical novella, and I really liked that it says that for the crime of showing his emotions in front of strangers was kind of what led to the unraveling, which is really interesting coming from a female author writing about a man's from a man's perspective.
Okay, next up we have The Memory of Her. This is the 3rd installment in the Gentleman Spy mystery series. The main character, Liza Broad, is a spy, and she sort of in this installment develops a somewhat romantic relationship with a fellow spy, a co-worker, we'll say, Alan Stratham. Stratham is recovering from a traumatic job that went wrong in Russia. He was taken captive and tortured, and Eliza Broad assists not only in his recovery, but also in Statham's plan for revenge against the man who tortured him. It's mystery, action, romance, and revenge all come together to make a pretty compelling 3rd installment of this series.
I will say there was a lot of recognition of these books when we had them on display at PNBA last month. And we just got an email from Central Avenue, who does a lot of Insta poetry, and they said that this is their best-selling series of books. It's doing very well. So Sally on the Rocks is one of the series that I was just mentioning. It's the British Library Women Writers. You probably heard us talking about these this fall because that's when they were launched. There are, with the 2 editions this season, I think there are roughly 10 in the series. And what they are is early to mid-century, either overlooked or forgotten classics of British women writers. This particular story tells the story of a woman who comes back to her hometown after the war, after a sort of bohemian life in Paris, and decides it's time to settle down and find a husband. And as she becomes, she is in competition for this guy with the town busybody, and they soon become fast friends, though, when they realize that the guy isn't really worth their time. It's part comedy, part poignant story. It's got sort of Evelyn Waugh, E.M. Forster vibes, And this whole series we're finding is doing well for in sort of a book club situation, where they can kind of plow through the whole series. So we have little point of sales stand-ups that we made for these to sort of showcase the full series. And we would love to get this the series into your store.
Yeah, my mom literally keeps calling me and telling me how much she loves each and every one as she reads them. So, you know, it's definitely, it works with a certain demographic.
Certain mamographic, yeah. I Am Stone. Gilchrist was a friend of H.G. Wells and Hugh Walpole. He wrote horror and was published kind of alongside Henry James's and Kenneth Graham's spookier stuff. He was the sweaty British Edgar Allan Poe looking contemporary of Lovecraft. And until now, his extremely weird stories had been mostly forgotten. As we discussed with the previous series, British Library is doing amazing work in bringing back out-of-print stuff in these very appealing, very attractive series. This is the Tales of the Weird. And as you can see, there are many, many books already in this series. And Jeff Battis at Sausalito Books on the Bay actually wrote us a long, long love letter to these books and their design aesthetic. He keeps them in a spinner by the register and reorders pretty frequently. So yeah, feel free to get into any or all of these, but I'm excited for Gilchrist's premiere here. We also have Lunar Tides, which is entirely different. When I tell booksellers about this publisher, I almost always mention Milkweed Editions, the Minneapolis publisher of Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass, as like a good comp for the whole poetry list from Book Hug. And that's Book Hug, not Book Thug. Book Thug's from New York, Book Hug's from Canada. You can tell the difference immediately. Shannon Webb Campbell is a partial Micmac heritage and uses the cycle of the moon in this book to give structure to a sequence of poems that addresses her inner life and her grief at losing her mother, but also a lot of themes of Indigenous resurgence.
And Gray Owl, The Mystery of Archie Bellany, is sort of a mixed, it's poetry, it's nonfiction writing, it's all kinds of different writings from Armand Garnett Ruffo about this figure of Archie Bellany, who was a person in the 1800s in Canada who pretended to be of First Nations descent and sort of ran a scam basically on that. And the author, his family, who's Ojibwe heritage, he's of Ojibwe heritage, his family has a connection with this person that pretended to be a First Nations person. This is the 25th anniversary edition of this book. And the author has gone on to have a long, illustrious career writing other kinds of poetry and fiction and nonfiction books. And this is just a great sort of reissue and a really cool story that I think a lot of Americans don't know.
Oh, and speaking of other things Americans don't know, there is no bottom to the rising tide of literature that exposes our bloody colonial past. But every once in a while, I get really excited when countries you and I didn't maybe expect to have such, well, exactly the same kind of history get in on the act. The first page of this book outlines a list of these horrific murders committed by the narrator's father during his time as an interpreter in the Dutch East Indies during their colonial expansion. And I did not know how much blood there was on Dutch hands. I've gotten most of my education, it turns out, in the guise of fiction. And this book comes very, very recommended. It is literary fiction, essentially about his relationship to his father, but goes deep, deep, deep into his father's background during the war. And we've also got The Autumn of the Ace. Now, when I was a kid, I had an aunt on the West Coast who read every New York Times bestseller, and then for Christmas would pack a year's worth of books into a box and send them to me and my sister. And that's how I became the kid at the junior high lunch table reading Memoirs of a Geisha and Joyce Carol Oates and Captain Corelli's Mandolin by this author, which was my first foray into his work, and not my last. This latest book is about the damage done to a father and son by war, and it's an exciting instance of a highly recognizable, like beloved author coming to you from IPG. You'll want a stack, I assume, for writers like me and your mom. And I will say this about the book. I can still quote passages from Captain Crowley's Mandolin like 20 years on. I'm really excited about this one.
Yes, Yes, More is from Australian debut author Anna Wood. It is short stories, contemporary short stories about friendship, memory, pleasure, and love. And like the cover a bunch, and we're excited to have a debut author writing short stories.
Oh, good. Speaking of authors who come to us with a relatively big name, this is a slim little book from a major author. It's not a heavy hitter. The book itself is not a heavy hitter. It's like 136 pages. But sometimes the greatest pleasures come from the smaller exercises of great talents. And Claire Massoud has lent her skills to a very cozy little domestic drama about a New York woman who's relocated to Australia and is in a conflict with her Australian maid. So this is going to satisfy Massoud's usual readers and maybe entertain some new fans. It's got a sexy pink cover and a decently priced little hardcover. And Massoud's fans are legion, so I'm confident you'll pick up a bunch of these for a table display. And returning to my previous topic, it's in terms of like, childhood, revelations. I also read and reread The House of the Spirits when I was a kid. And years later, I recommended it to a lot of readers who are aging out of, books like Esperanza Rising and looking for the next step. And this is a worthy book to add to that list. It's another gorgeous multi-generational novel, but one that's based on the experience of the Florida-born author's family and the author's experience as the daughter of a Santeria priestess set in the middle of the century-long Puerto Rican struggle for self-determination. I mean, ongoing, I should say. And like I said before, there are a lot of ways to learn our history through fiction, and this is a very good one. And on the topic of learning history and maybe just mythology through fiction, we've got Argo, Circe, Song of Achilles, Ariadne, A Thousand Ships. You've just got shelves full, I know right now, of Greek mythology and history recast as contemporary fiction. Even TikTok's gotten in on it with Song of Achilles in a big way. And if you were wondering what book to recommend to those ravenous readers of modern novels based in antiquity, look no further than Argo. It is Ben Affleck free. And similarly, I've got I, Antigone, which was Oedipus Rex as written by his daughter, Antigone. Anne Carson has had her way with this story with Antigone before in the form of the book Antigone and an NYRB translation she did of the play by Sophocles. But I promise you that this book is more accessible than either of those. I also got Bystander by Mike Steeves, also from Book Hug. I hadn't actually heard of Book Hug before I came to IPG. Now I fully endorse like their whole list. Mike Steeves reminds me a little bit of Peter Stamm, whose books I used to work on at Other Press, or Gerbrand Becker, this Dutch writer who's published by Penguin and Archipelago. I'm just a very big fan of, so much that I started like writing fan mail to his translator. This is the same kind of psychological story though that they write. A man who thinks he has life figured out, kind of torn from what he perceives as his comfortable life and forced into confronting neighbors and other people in a world he's tried very hard not to engage with.
All right, now we have Paradise Cove. So this is a mystery thriller novel. It's a detective novel, a Roscoe Conklin mystery, and it's the second in the series, but it can be read on its own, like a lot of these detective-based series. The publisher is thinking of this as a top book for them for this season. It takes place in Bonaire, and on this island of Bonaire in the Caribbean, body parts start washing ashore, and it's up to Roscoe Conklin to figure out who the killer is. And mystery thriller fans are going to really love this book. It's definitely up there as one of the great mystery thriller books that we have coming out this season.
All right, page 2.
Woo.
That's my favorite page because that's the page that's got the shadow people on top. There is no single thriller that I'm more excited about than this one, and we've got a lot of thrillers. The Shadow People is written by the same author as the Manitou, which sold like 500,000 copies when it came out, and was made into a film. And I'm going to be clear about when it came out. It was made into a film in the 70s, starring Tony Curtis. And you might ask, looking at the content of this, is Graham Masterson an anthropologist who's capable or qualified to be discussing cannibal groups? And I would say probably not. He is, however, one of the best and most prolific horror writers of the 20th century, and I'm always ready for a good cannibal caper from a master horror writer. So highly recommend this for your horror fans.
And in that same sort of vein, Psychopaths Anonymous from Will Carver. It's a mind-addling thriller about a lovable psychopath. She's got a high-powered job, a string of casual lovers, and a beautiful home, but she is both a functional alcoholic who becomes addicted to killing men when her AA meetings make her want to drink more. So she starts her own support group called Psychopaths Anonymous, and one of the members of this group gets a little bit sloppy in their nightly killings of men, and it attracts the attention of the police. It's been optioned for TV, oddly enough, by the Disney Channel, if you can imagine. This book is already out in the UK, and it's doing tremendous there.
Next up, we have The Quiet People by Paul Cleave. Paul Cleave is a very obviously highly praised and decorated crime and thriller writer. This particular novel is crime writing duo Lisa and Cameron have been known to boast their combined experience as crime novelists and how it imbues this writing experience imbues them with the exact kind of knowledge it would take to pull off the perfect crime. However, the boasting kind of comes home to roost when their 7-year-old son goes missing, and suddenly Lisa and Cameron find themselves to be the objects of suspicion and speculation that they normally only know from a safe distance and on pen and paper. It's a sharp, engrossing thriller with a pretty good dose of dark humor, and a must-have for anybody who likes thrillers. It's set in New Zealand, as all of Paul Cleave's titles are, and yeah. Oh, this one is also me. Waiting for Venus, also kind of an international locale. This one is set in 1980 Singapore on the, pardon me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Bukit Timah campus of the National University of Singapore. The premise is sort of a murder turned to look like a suicide when a professor is found hanging from a spinning ceiling fan in his classroom. It's kind of campus novel meets murder mystery meets historical novel, as there are a lot of elements of World War II and Singapore's origins as a nation in general, so a lot of historicity to it too.
The Air War by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It would be foolish of me to attempt to describe the plot of the 8th book in a series of science fiction, and so I will not be foolish this one time today. But Tchaikovsky is wildly prolific, and we've got damn near all of his stuff by way of Tor UK. This is, like I said, book 8 in the series. None of them are small. This one clocks in at what, like 672 pages. You take a look at the related list for a couple more. if you've sold a few here and there, you really ought to grab this one too. It's a shame not to continue a series on your shelves. I know that with like Jemison, you're constantly running out of one or the other, but you should keep a few of these around and back because his readers are many, and there are a fair number of books previous and another series, if I'm not mistaken. So grab a hold of this one and don't let go. And now we've come to one of my favorite books on our list. This is On the Line, Notes from a Factory by Joseph Ponthus, and translated by Stephanie Smee. So I can feel that this book is going to hit a chord with a lot of folks. Ponthus was a social worker who just couldn't find any work in his field. And he spent 2 years like on the line working in a processing factory, slopping around in blood and viscera spilled from the bodies of dead fish as he kind of made his body into a machine for the doing of this onerous task. And even as he worked, his mind meandered among the works of some of his favorite poets and writers, and he composed this book, which is written in free verse. It was published in French to acclaim, and then in Australia in English to even greater acclaim. And the author passed away from cancer at the age of 42. So this is the only book we're going to get from him. Get this book. This is the book you should get.
Next up, we have Disappearance of a Scribe by Dana Stabenow. This is the second of her Eye of Isis series, and she is a wildly popular crime fiction writer. She, like I said, this is an Egyptian crime trilogy. It's a great entrance into Dana Stabenow if your customers don't know her. And kind of along the lines of what Jeff was saying about like the popularity of like Circe and those kinds of books. It's definitely along those lines.
Peter James, Left You Dead is the most recent title in Peter James' Roy Gray series, of which there are over a dozen titles. This year was made into a BBC series that is also on BritBox, where they translate the first two books in their entirety into feature-length television. Is it TV? Is it a movie? I don't know. And the third one is coming out next year. And so this whole series has been reinvigorated by the telenovela. Is that what that is? Death of a Mermaid from Head of Zeus, Leslie Thompson. This is also a standalone from her usual books are called series. Most popular series is called The Detective's Daughter. But this book, she comes back to her little seaside town that she grew up in after not speaking to her family for 20 years, and because she's burying her parents. And she goes looking for a high school friend that she hasn't seen, obviously 20 years. And yeah, the story develops from there. This one is a bit more literary than your typical detective story.
This next one is The Last Professional. It is a historical thriller, and it is not a graphic novel. It is a fully written novel, but you can see these beautiful illustrations that are throughout the novel by Colin Uology. And this is based on the author's actual experience of riding rails when he was a young man, I think in the 70s, he told me. And so just a really fascinating novel about a thriller that involves riding the rails, and sort of a lot of that comes from real lived experience. You can feel it definitely in the novel.
These next two are from a new publisher for us, a Spanish language publisher, Editorial Alma. We usually tend to put all of our Spanish titles into a different catalog, but I thought these were so beautiful that I wanted to show them to you. Plus, we've also really had, I would say, a big uptick in people carrying Spanish language books. These are classics that are fully illustrated, and the illustrations are beautiful. There's two sets of them here. You can see all of them that are in the series. And yeah, they look really exciting and visually captivating.
Okay, so the first of our Tokyo Pop books, if you don't know, we distribute Tokyo Pop within the US, and actually we distribute them everywhere. I don't know why I said that. This first one is Assassin's Creed Dynasty Volume 1. It reminds me of the TV show Legends of Tomorrow, about these group of time travelers who end up in different eras of history. In this one, they're in the Tang Dynasty in medieval China. And I don't know anything about Assassin's Creed, the video game, but I still love this one. So you don't necessarily have to know about these characters in order to get into this book.
Double Volume 1 and Volume 2 is a new series from Tokyo Pop. The storyline is that there's a sort of an apprentice actor and a more seasoned actor, and they become friends, and with that friendship comes, you know, sort of rooting for each other to get roles and to get better at their craft, but then also a lot of jealousies at the same time. And yeah, this is not a boys' love book, but it looks like it could be, for ages 16 and up.
And the next one we have is Alice in Bashunenland, Volume 1, and Volume 2 is the next one down. This is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland. Bashunen means very attractive man or boy, and in this one, Alice she wakes up in a video game, and she has this she has to turn this cadre of attractive boys into a J-pop group. This is an absurdist comedy take on Alice in Wonderland. It's pretty great.
It happens to me all the time, yeah. Oh, but I am looking for some serious love. One of the endearing things about Tokyo Pop's titles is when they're not extremely convoluted like the last one. They're very, very earnest and straight to the point. And I'm looking for serious love is now among the things I'm likely to announce as I walk through the house looking for my keys or my shoes. But this is also another entry in the Boys Love series, which is a deep list, as we've more or less addressed, of manga centered around same-sex relationships. So we've got boys love, we've got girls love. That's about as much love as we've gotten to so far. I'm sure there's some other love out there. Unless you think this is kid stuff, I beseech you to note the 18 plus age suggestion. This isn't for kids. Don't put this in the kids section. This is some adult manga.
We like to call it illustrated YA.
Is that what we like to call it?
It is what we like to call it.
Okay. This is our Not So Lonely Planet Travel Guide, Volume 2. You may have heard one of us sell you our Not So Lonely Travel Planet Guide, Volume 1 in the fall. This is the follow-up. This is another boys' love title. I absolutely love this title. It's about two boys or young men that are in love with each other and are traveling the world together, and they're planning on getting married when they come back home. One of the characters is a trans man. So it's got just like the most queer rep. It's awesome. I love it so much. And I highly recommend it.
The Fox and Little Tanooki is the sweetest series from Tokyo Pop. It's good for any age range. It's about the relationship of this fox and Tanooki, which is a raccoon-like Japanese animal. And it's done very well. Sells super well. It's a good place to start for anybody who is wanting to dip their toes into manga a bit. And Dekoboko Bittersweet Days is the follow-up to Dekoboko Sugar Nights, which came out last season. It's done incredibly well. We've had a hard time keeping it in stock. It's 18 and up, and it is a boys' love title. Which you'll see both in the Love by Love little banner here, and then also Yao Y. And also we're hoping to do a point of sale for the Boys Love and Girls Love title, the Love by Love series, for Valentine's Day. So if that's something that's of interest for you guys, please let us know, because we're constantly telling Tokyo Pop how we need that.
I was reincarnated as the villainess in an Otomi game, but the boys love me anyway. Volume 2 is our next book. We all probably sold you volume 1 last season as well. This title, of course, just rolls off the tongue. Just as you, as you may or may not know, Otomi games are a style of video game. They're a dating video game. And in this one, the protagonist wakes up inside her favorite Otomi game, but she has been reincarnated as the antagonist of this game. So she has to try to sabotage the game, all while trying to fend these boys off, having them not fall in love with her. It is a cute, fun, funny book. It's ages 13 and up, so it skews a little bit younger, which means that it's a great title for people to start with in manga if they want.
And obviously these have not been translated into English yet.
They're not in Japanese. The ones we sell aren't in Japanese yet.
This is a very exciting concept. I will point out that this is also part of the Boys Love series. Apparently, we all love the Boys Love series. It is, again, 18 and up. And so I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if in this idyllic world in which carnivores and herbivores enjoy each other's company, let's say, mutually, Yagi, the ravenous book-eating goat bookseller, gets with his scary wolf boss. This is basically like Zootopia, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And the side note, the word for eating books is bibliophagy. I had to look that one up, but there you have it.
All right.
All right.
Alice in Kyoto Forest, Volume 1 is another manga retelling of Alice in Wonderland. This one a little bit closer to the actual Alice in Wonderland, where Alice has to go home to Kyoto and gets lost in the forest and meets all sorts of forest creatures. And you know the story of Alice in Wonderland. That's basically what this is. It's a really charming book. Again, it skews a little bit younger, so it's a great starting point, particularly if people know Alice in Wonderland. It's a great sort of thing to get them started in manga.
You probably know NBM books. They do mostly biographic graphic novels, and we have 3 of them here. I don't know where Hitchcock went, but the first is on Rosa Parks. Really beautiful illustrations. There will be text in there at some point. These are text-free spreads right now. And then Django Reinhardt, the musician. And there is a mammoth one on Alfred Hitchcock that somehow got
that
out of
is order. Not what we use. We don't use the word mammoth to describe Alfred Hitchcock. He's a very average sized man in a certain regard.
The book is mammoth. It's 320 pages and $44.99. So it's kind of 3 times the size of the other 2.
On another note, we've got Spices and Lime. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Eating in for most meals for the last 18 months has pretty well tapped my repertoire of recipes. And I did move from one of the best food neighborhoods in New York, Little India, basically in Queens, to a city known mostly for potholes, I think, and cheesesteak. And so if your cookbook section could use a lift, offering really quite accessible cookbooks like this one, and like the vegan curry house favorites that we sold last season, can really give your customers something new to contemplate when they're looking around bleakly through their kitchen for something fresh to do.
Okay, next we have More Than Veggies. And what I love about this book is, if you're like me, you love all different kinds of Asian cuisine from all different countries all over Asia, but sometimes they're full of meat, and maybe you, like me, don't eat meat. This is like the book for you. It takes a lot of different dishes that usually have meat in them and teaches you how to make them in a plant-based way. So I'm definitely planning on cooking from this often because I love like a satay and, all sorts of different foods that usually I don't get because I don't eat chicken or I don't eat beef. So so this is a really cool book.
Hey, and kids like noodles too. And this is an ABC book from the Collective Book Studio, who will be showing you a bunch of their titles. And we have shown you a few. G is for goulash. And then when it makes sense, there are translations, multilingual translations, ABC board book from Collective Book Studio. And then also from them is B is for bagels, which I'm holding up right here. It is also an ABC book. You can feel the everything seeds on the top. They really fuss over the production of their books. They love a veneer. There's also a recipe in the back of the book, 2 recipes for quick bagels and then traditional bagels. Really cute book for foodie kids and foodie wannabe parents, foodie wannabe kids.
1 in 18 Americans has lived in New York. Can you really afford not to have the bagel book?
And then right after those 2 kid books, we have What Does Rain Smell Like? Which I think is a great little cash wrappy book. I'm sure you all have experienced becoming sort of the town center where people want to come talk to actual human beings in person. And I think this is a really great way to sort of not get too personal with your customers, but also engage them in talking about the weather. And then we have Preserving the Italian Way. Another thing that I feel like has seen a bump since the pandemic started is preserving. And this book is not just jarring and canning, but it also includes sections on liquor like limoncello, as well as how to make cheese and how to cure meats as well. Hey, another one from Collective Book Studio. There are now 3 in this series of concept books for kids. This one is color. These are all photo-based board books. They look really great because they've sort of made the backgrounds minimal. They've really, and this one especially, color-coded everything, and I really like the amount of photos that we see in these books. And I think whenever there's 3 of anything, the titles start to sell themselves, so I would recommend bringing in the ABC and the 1, 2, 3 as well as the color book. Someone was likely to buy them all. How to Design a Garden. In the 1960s, John Brooks was the first one to insist that, like the interiors of our homes, that the gardens, our gardens should also reflect the personality of the homeowners. He had a book that came out in 1969 called A Room Outside, which sort of talked about these concepts and became a very well-known classic garden design book. He put together the English gardens and Chicago Botanic Gardens, as well as a private estate in Dutchess County, New York. A history of gardening in 50 objects. There's no garden tips in here. There's no design elements. It's all about the implements that have been used since the beginning of time for gardening. It's sort of encyclopedic in that way. There's a few pages on each of the 50 objects, paired with kind of classic botanical illustrations.
Okay, this one is Folk Tales from the Garden to continue the gardening theme. This one is put together by Donald Smith, who is an accomplished storyteller and, in fact, the director of the Scottish International Storytelling Festival. And this book is sort of showcases stories told in and about gardens, from your small backyard garden to large estates. I kind of like to think about it in like little micro magic moments. And it's a great coming together of a hobby we're all kind of getting into suddenly, and storytelling.
Hilda on the Record is from Chicago Review Press, and it's about a young girl in small town Pennsylvania who started writing stories for her very small newspaper. And then a murder happened a block or so away from her, and she also covered that. And it received national attention because she started being slagged for her age and gender, and her response to that was covered nationally. She is the author of a best-selling scholastic series of chapter books that are co-written with her father. Oh, I just did something. Sorry.
Just
happened.
you can just hit back to list.
The next book is in a snowstorm.
What just happened? I think we're at the end here, right? Okay.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, so the next one is Discover Her Art, Women Artists and Their Masterpieces. And this is a really cool book about individual female artists and their most famous works. So it gives a little bit of biography about the artists themselves, and then talks about their work and why they're important and all of that. One of the authors is a children's librarian, so knows how to write for kids. This age recommendation is 8 to 12. So it's for, young kids, sort of middle grade readers, but really gets them into these women artists and their masterpieces. It's a really cool book.
Buster Books, you will see a bunch of these super colorful sort of activity books for kids. There are often many in the relateds. This one is sort of personal challenges. How many cups can you stack? How quickly can you do little tasks, either personal best or, against your opponent, a race against the clock, that sort of thing. Great for people that are stuck in their homes. The next three titles are from a new French publisher that we just picked up. They are all nonfiction, heavily illustrated, and come with some sort of like extra features. These first two, Dinosaurs and also The Egg, and if you go to the relateds, you can see the other in the series, but they all feature these sort of acetate overlays that expose sort of interiors of these objects, and which is a lot of food and nature sort of things. And then Life Below the City, there are also 7 relateds in these, and they all feature these flashlights that come with it, and you shine a light through the page to see like what's going on underground. So they're really great nonfiction, beautiful illustrations, not super American looking, which is great for those of you into that sort of thing.
This next one is called Becoming Beatrix, The Life of Beatrix Potter in the World of Peter Rabbit. It's a biography, a juvenile nonfiction biography, middle grade readers of Beatrix Potter, along with writing, Squirrel Nutkin, Jemima Puddle Duck, those kinds of books. She also worked as a farmer and a sheep breeder and a conservationist. So it's a really cool sort of look into Beatrix Potter. And for kids who maybe are past reading Beatrix Potter books or having them read to them, as my mom read to me when I was a kid, but are still interested in her as a person. Next up, we have Michelle and Barack Obama. You might have heard of them. This is one of the Trailblazing Teams books. So there's a number of these books of teams, and, Marie and Pierre Curie and the First Men on the Moon and things like that. So this is just a really great collection. I think Jeff's going to tell you about the human computers, right, Jeff? Or
I think Jeff's going to tell you about right, the human computers.
I think that's enough. We get it.
Okay, all right. They're from Hidden Figures. That's the other Trailblazing team.
That's what I was going to say, essentially. Jeez, Chris.
Okay, all right.
I was going to tell them all about
Chris.
Sorry.
2016 Hidden Figures.
Cut us off. Jesus.
It's the Trailblazing Teams. Yeah, Chris.
Jeff
Anyway.
and I are the trailblazing team.
Yeah, we're the
obviously.
team. I'm Janelle Monáe in this scenario.
Mhm.
What about this? Come on, I want to hear about the rainbow poo. Come on, Jeff.
That's not
Read
me.
about me, said the flea.
Oh,
What
that is
about me,
me.
said the flea.
What about me? Said the flea. Right. This is a pretty irresistible children's book. I was like, the Rainbow Poo book is not mine, but the flea definitely is. It's an irresistible children's book about being overlooked, a sentiment that most children and some sales reps can sympathize with. Buster Books, as Chris was saying before, is the kids' imprint of one of our best loved publishers, Michael O'Mara Books. And beyond this standout title, they do have those activity books you mentioned and a lot of other great stuff for kids with very, very high production value. So take a gander when you can.
You might remember editorial El Pirata from last season. I had pretty good success with these books, of which I think there's maybe like 7 now. The handle, the board book handle that kids can carry around themselves is the most obvious selling feature, but also they have some pretty unique titles in the kids market that I haven't really seen before. Like this one called Let's Play Without Screens. Last season they had one about called Bye Bye Pacifier that I think was, not a title that you see in the kids section all the time. Not just like something simple like Let's Go to Bed. I really like those titles because they seem pretty unique.
And I think most, if not all of those editorial paradas have a Spanish language version as well, right?
Yes.
Salim, Mamu, and me. You all know the publisher that we don't represent, Lee and Low. They're pretty well known for their annual report on diversity in publishing, and they have led the way in making diverse children's books available in the United States, but they are definitely not the only game in town. Salim Mamu is just one of a great many excellent, extraordinarily beautiful books from Tulika, an Indian publisher that's so well loved by some of my accounts, Quarter Square Books in particular, that they've got whole shelves set aside to display like all of these books. And they came to us, Tulika, that is, like a couple of seasons ago, and Porter Square hadn't known where to get them. And as soon as I showed up with Tulika in my catalog, they got very excited, ordered the whole backlist. I can send you a publisher-specific catalog if you want. They just do really, really beautiful books. I'm a huge fan. And in the realm of these diverse children's books, we also have Tiger Brother. This is from Shanghai Press, which we just took on, I think, this season. And it is beautiful, Linda Bond. Thank you for noticing. This is part of the Stories of the Chinese Zodiac series. And so if you look under Related, I think, you'll see a few other titles. Or comps, I'm sorry, they have it under comps. But you'll see Little Calf, Little Rat, and the Golden Seed, Magical Rooster, Bronze Dog. And it is bilingual in this case. Some of these books are bilingual but I'm sorry, all of them are available in English. Some of them are also bilingual. Oh, thank you, Margaret, for pointing that out. Very, very clever. Next up, we have Firkin and the Grey Gangsters. This book is totally wackadoo. It is a series of profoundly Scottish tales for children featuring thinly veiled allegories for events in the adult world. And a previous book of Anne Scott Moncrief's was called Anti-Robbo, and that had some of the anarchic qualities of The Cat in the Hat or Pippi Longstocking. But the titular story in this one features a young red squirrel fighting back against a horde of invasive gray squirrels from the USA. And the sole surviving blurb from the original publication in the first half of the 20th century, it's worth repeating. Maybe every morning, maybe while you look in a mirror. It goes like this. It argues against convention and for freedom, against respectability and for bohemianism, against stale compromise and for the open beauty of the Highland countryside. And that is what it's all about.
We saw Editorial Alma earlier doing those illustrated classics, and these are of the same ilk. They're Spanish language. They are classics, but they are for a younger reader, ages 3 to 5, but equally vibrant and beautiful illustrations. And here are a few of the relateds.
All right, we've got Just Maria up next. This is a book I'm excited about. It's the protagonist, Maria Romero, is a blind sixth grader who is trying very hard, as most sixth graders are, to just be normal. But of course, her classmate and neighbor, JJ, kind of throws a wrench in the works, so to speak, and kind of ropes her into his own kids detective agency style setup. And suddenly she finds herself compelled and engrossed when a local girl goes missing, and she and JJ set off an adventure to figure out what's happened. The author, Jay Hardwig, is a certified teacher for the visually impaired. He has a huge amount of experience with visually impaired children, working with them in summer camps, doing after-school programs, and it comes highly recommended by advocates and activists from the community.
Okay, the next one is Once Upon a Tune, which is a book I absolutely love, that I definitely would have had as a kid if it were available to me. It's a collection of 6 stories that inspired great works of music. So The Hall of the Mountain King, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, The Swan of Tuonela, Scheherazade, The Flight of the Bumblebee, and William Tell. Thank you, Jeff, for correcting my pronunciation earlier on that. And so it's just a great way to introduce kids to both the stories behind some great classical music pieces and bring them into classical music.
Bernard the Fireman is also from Editorial El Pirata. These are not illustrated classics or sort of repackaging of stories that you've heard before. These are all new stories. They are for beginning readers. There are several in the relateds. I really like the illustrations. I don't know the stories, but with illustrations like this, who really cares? Sorry about that.
All right, we've got The Inheritance now. This one looks amazing, and I definitely highly recommend it to everyone. It's one of the quotes that sort of establishes the premise is, "All this will soon be yours. Respect what I have built and make it prosper." These are the last words of the old industrialist before dying, the sort of paternal character that sets up this story. And while the 3 brothers discuss how to fulfill their father's wishes, the sister, of course, steps in and tries to play kind of a mediator, so to speak. Armin Grieder, author and illustrator of award-winning titles such as The Mediterranean, The Island, The City, Australia, To Z, and Diamonds. His work immediately recognizable by sort of brooding charcoal images and minimal text reflects his background. He is hugely awarded and internationally recognized, including a nomination for the Hans Christian Andersen Prize. The Inheritance tells of the greed and blindness of those who hold economic power and reminds us that silence and indifference amount to complicity. Though the book deals in heavy topics and imagery, it's aimed at an audience of 8 to 14-year-olds. And I think in this way, The Inheritance sort of stands out amongst juvenile fiction, specifically for its scope and the earnest and soberness of its themes. It doesn't baby, it's not cutesy, and I think there's not enough kids literature out there that sort of treats it very seriously like this.
All right, the next one is The River Between Hearts. And this is definitely a Colorado-based book, and one that writes beautifully about the landscape of Colorado. But it's an adventure novel that revolves around a young girl who has to get over the death, or get through the death of the sudden loss of her father, and sort of how she does that. She ends up on an adventure through the Colorado wilderness, and so it's both beautiful nature writing and also a book about surviving or getting through loss, or what loss means.
Beep beep. This book works two angles, see. One of them is a Marxist critique of our reliance on various kinds of transportation, and the other is an invitation to shout things. Both are very popular with children. It's also very helpful for young ones who are still learning their letters and sounds, as there is ample onomatopoeia and alliteration. Go beep beep.
More from Buster Books, knock knock jokes. Don't really need to get too deeply into this one. It's pretty self-explanatory. Again, these great prices, super colorful and poppy. They kind of pop off the shelf.
Tell us a joke, Chris. Amanda's with me on that one. All right. We've moved on, Amanda. I'll tell you a joke later. Feeling good about me. When I tour through the children's sections of your stores, I'm struck sometimes by how many new books there are about helping normalize emotions of every kind these days for children. And seeing it on a page and knowing how to actually manage emotions are two different things. This book acknowledges that children are fully emotional, if fundamentally inexperienced little people, and offers exercises and coping mechanisms for an array of feelings and situations that kids confront every day. This is a key accompaniment to what I'm sure is one of the biggest, fastest growing parts of your kids and parenting sections.
Another one from Otterberry Books, who I like a bunch. Hey Girl is Otterberry does a ton of poetry for kids, which I think is a very noble pursuit. And this particular one is written by an autistic mother and illustrated by her autistic son. To me, this looks like very much like 90s zine culture, taking influence from that. Although, I doubt very seriously the sun was around then. But I really like Otterberry Books, and I'm hoping they find a home with some of you all.
Ripped away. Margaret, you're not audible.
My bad. All right. How about now? Good.
Good.
Right.
Good.
This is time traveling. This is a time traveling YA title. It kicks off with a lovesick Abe, who has been shunned once again by his crush, and he seeks solace and hope from a local fortune teller. Adventure ensues when the fortune teller warps Abe to Jack the Ripper, Victorian London. And not only that, but he's shocked to find that his crush is also transported with him. In order for them both to get back to their time place, they'll need to decipher the fortune teller's prophecy and how her words are implicated in history's most infamous serial killer.
All right, the next two are part of Chicago Review Press's Women of Power series. So it's looking at women who are doing awesome stuff. The first one, Quake Chasers, is about 15 women who are earthquake scientists. So anywhere from looking at landscapes of places that have been demolished by earthquakes, or taking seismic readings on volcanoes or all sorts of things like that. And the other one is Idea Makers. So 15 fearless female entrepreneurs who have Stacy of Stacy's Pita Chips, and just a bunch of ladies doing heading awesome companies that you've probably heard of. So
I think I'm more excited about card games than really maybe any buyer or anybody that works for IPG. I have sort of been torturing my family with wanting to play board games and card games over the pandemic, and nobody else does. I feel like I haven't seen this book in the store in probably a decade, and I want this book. So if you feel the same way or know or have some customers that are into board games and card games, this one's for you.
Okay, next up, we have the Regency coloring book. If you, like me, spent one day watching all of Bridgerton, this is probably for you. And maybe, I don't know, you can sit and watch season 2 and color in these amazing Regency buildings and people. It's really a fun coloring book. And yeah, I think you guys will like it. And then we have Modern Mystic, True Tarot Book and Tarot Deck. As you may or may not know, it is bad juju to buy your own tarot deck. So one must buy a tarot deck for a friend if they are looking to get into tarot. And I think this is kind of the perfect gift. It's got a book that talks through different tarot, how to read tarot cards, and then it's got a tarot deck for the beginner or for people who maybe are looking for something new. And then we also have The Life of Charlotte Bronte by Elizabeth Gaskell. If you are not like me and don't have a degree in Victorian English literature and didn't get assigned this book multiple times in college, not just once, multiple times in college, maybe you don't know about this awesome biography of Charlotte Bronte by her good friend Elizabeth Gaskell. Elizabeth Gaskell was a prolific writer of Victorian novels as well. And this one is somewhat hard to find in the US. I think it's I know it's a really great book. It's really fun to read. And I think anyone who's a fan of Charlotte Bronte or that era of books will really enjoy this book.
No 80s mixtape is complete without at least a few tracks from the aggressively poppy Bananarama. This is not just a who's who of a decade of amazing musical talent, but also a really intimate look inside the lifelong friendship between Sarah and Karen, the core of the band. We don't really care that much about Siobhan. And when it pubbed in the UK last year, it was named to best of lists by the Sunday Times, the Huffington Post, and the Daily Mail. And that's really saying something.
Next up, we have She's a Rainbow, The Extraordinary Life of Anita Pallenberg. It has come to my attention that there are a lot of people who don't know that Anita Pallenberg is the person who basically got the Rolling Stones together. She is an amazing woman and just a legend. She starred in Barbarella with Jane Fonda. And, it's basically a great gift for your friend who loves the Rolling Stones, but doesn't know about this woman who is the reason that they exist.
Radiohead, Life in a Glass House. I put this book in because I just got our Palazzo Editions book on New Order and Joy Division, and I was really surprised by how well it's done. The quality of it, that is. And this is the newest music book from Palazzo Editions on Radiohead. Van Lifers from the History Press. This book is kind of riding on the coattails of vagabond life, living on the road. That has also another thing that I feel like has become more popular over the pandemic, people living out of their vehicles. Lots of conversion vans and interviews with the people that have done those conversions.
Okay, this is After Agatha, Women Write Crime. It's a literary criticism, but I think it will appeal to a larger audience than just that. Basically, anyone who is a glut for murder mysteries, especially murder mysteries in the wake of Agatha Christie, myself included. It sort of examines how British, American, and Canadian female crime writers pursued their craft and what they think about it now that it's sort of a developed genre. The book asks you to consider why women in particular, no matter demographic or context, are drawn to the murder mystery as a genre. and why crime and murder mystery genres have been the few areas where women writers are even allowed to thrive, and do. I see this as an investigation into the quotidian fear of violence that so many women know too well. The book interrogates the roles and players that constitute the criminal justice system and how that system addresses or doesn't really address violence against women.
Okay, next up we have Guernica, Painting at the End of the World. This is part of the Landmark Library series of books about important works, including The Rite of Spring, Divine Comedy, Magna Carta, etc. This covers Picasso's masterpiece of anti-war art called Guernica, which is on display in Spain. It was painted, I think, in Madrid. It was painted after the bombing of a Basque country town called Guernica, which was done by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy at the request of Franco's Spanish government. And it's one of the most influential paintings in history. And it is also my personal favorite painting. I absolutely love it. And so this is a book about the painting, its history, and its influence.
Well, I think we can all agree that the 20th century was 100 years of mostly bad shit. But Renison, he could have picked any year and recorded the astounding changes, the extraordinary artistic achievements, the births and deaths of tyrants and killers of all kinds, but he picked 1922. And what he's done here is really, really cool. It's a digest of a very notable year in every regard, rendered into relatively brief little sketches that can be read all together or at intervals. However you take them, this book is going to leave you with a deeper understanding of the events of a tumultuous year. And it's going to be shipping well in time for Mother's Day because, you know, moms love 1922, I've found. It's just a truism in the book publishing industry.
All right, The Local, A History of the English Pub. I'd like to live within this book. It's a new edition, so it actually also includes some chapters on how COVID has affected the pubs in the UK. And it looks at the full 300 plus year history of UK pubs. It looks at their architecture, the people who run them, and their place in British life. So just a really fun, cool book about the history of the British pub and where it is within British culture. And alongside that, Liquid History, an illustrated guide to London's greatest pubs. This is written by the host of Liquid History Tours, which is a touring company that takes people around to different pubs in London. And it features 50 of London's greatest pubs, from Shakespeare's own pub to the pub Jack the Ripper hid out in after he committed murders, and many, many more. This is a great book. Even if you're not going to London on vacation, it's kind of just fun to read about the history of these different pubs.
Okay, we have now gotten to the Universal Translator. This and also the title that will follow immediately after this, which is called The Atlas of Unusual Languages, are two books I recommend for the linguistic nerd in your life. I would say ultimately, if I had to boil it down and be crude about it, the difference between the first one and Atlas is that the first one is focused on languages that don't actually exist in the agreed upon reality that we all know and love. It's languages like Klingon from Star Trek and various other Tolkien, a la Tolkien, including even updates regarding Mandalorian and The Witcher and the most up-to-date pop culture things that have language building, and then after the language building, the world building beyond that. The Atlas of Unusual Languages, also, as I said, great for linguistic nerds. I'm gonna probably try to get myself a copy of this at some point just because it looks so cool. If you are someone who's extremely interested in languages that go understudied, such as Basque or Catalan or Welsh languages, or Irish, Old Scots, anything like that, this is a great supplementary text to whatever your knowledge already is, including maps, sort of language genealogies, and some great pictures, et cetera, et cetera. I think this next one is me too. Yes, Book of the Earthworm.
Go Earthworms.
Do what?
Oh, I was just cheering for the Earthworms.
Oh yeah, that would have been a great mascot for my high school. But this one I like to describe as a love letter to the Earthworm. it is Sally Cuthard, I think that's how it's pronounced. She sort of reveals the miracle of the earthworm and how they don't get all of the praise necessarily that they deserve. It's thanks to these little guys that we are eating and living in any kind of stable ecosystem at all.
Hey, Dracora is third in a series called the Medoran Chronicles from Australian writer Lynette Noni. Young adult and fantasy is kind of like maybe all there is in YA right now. The Prison Healer is a book that I noticed people had a pretty good sales track record with. But last season, and it's actually just about to come out, is Lilia, the second in the series, the first of which was a Carne. And once this one comes out, we will have all three in the series. What just happened?
You got to hit.
Snowstorm.
Oh.
Sorry.
I thought you wanted to hear me talk about Firkin and the Grey Gangsters again.
Uh-huh.
You're on, do you need to see a therapist? Do I need to see a therapist?
Do I need to see a therapist? Yes.
Yes.
Who doesn't? But this book draws on the latest sort of studies that have come up over COVID that argues that the reason to see a therapist have changed, especially since our workplace and our home life has changed so drastically.
Okay, next up we have Morocco from the Culture Smart series. This particular title describes the life of Moroccans today. It will share with you the key customs and traditions. So basically, you do not embarrass or humiliate yourself or offend anyone when you get to Morocco. Yes, tips on communicating, socializing, and navigating unfamiliar situations. I will say, as the series title suggests, the Culture Smart books are more focused on places, peoples, and customs rather than a straightforward travel guide a la Lonely Planet. I consider this more of a cultural survey rather than a guide on best hotels or rest stops.
Bigotry on Broadway. Now, Ishmael Reed, almost all of his stuff in print is available from us through Baraka, or from Baraka Books through us, I should say, or Dalkey Archive Press, which was my first job in publishing. He is a legend. He wrote a play called The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda just to take down Hamilton. And that play was produced and financed by Toni Morrison before she passed. I mean, solid legend actions right there. This is a collaborative effort with his wife, Carla Blank, to collect essays by folks from all walks of life who have been historically and constantly excluded from Broadway. This is a must-read for trans people, people of color, who want to know why they almost never see folks who look like them in lead roles, and for Broadway fans who just have always sensed that there's something wrong with Broadway.
Being Essential is a business book from Disruption Books for the modern era. It uses diverse voices and takes from a multitude of perspectives. It's short and to the point, and it has a big marketing budget. Look at that cover. Oh, hey, the Sunday Times, A Life in the Day. This is kind of like, there's a similar piece weekly piece in the New York Times where they ask sort of celebrities and well-known folks, writers, stuff like that, how they spend their days. This one is not very UK centric in terms of the people that are featured. It's got people like Nelson Mandela, Ricky Gervais, Oprah Winfrey, Dolly Parton, Marie Kondo, those types. Seems like a pretty good little gifty book to have on your coffee table and leaf through when you feel like it. Singapore Hawker Food. I really like this book. It's pretty interesting. It's kind of like Margaret's book the Morocco book that she just showed us, in that this is the equivalent in the US is kind of our food trucks. And there's no recipes. It is basically describing foods and drinks that you can get from these hawker salesmen, and it describes the ingredients and what they're made of, so that you can. And I think that this is probably the only way that you can find this information about the ingredients, and they're just what they're called. Great photos as well.
Malka's Notebook. You should check out the interiors of this, y'all. You've been hearing from us all night and probably all season about the Collective Book Studio, and to hammer the point home, all of their stuff is extremely beautifully produced. They snaked their designer from Chronicle. So if you're accustomed to seeing, that level of production, you'll see it here for sure. I think this book's a pretty ideal bat mitzvah gift. Our hero Malka takes her initial instruction on a lifelong journey into the sacred Torah. And Mira Amiris is a religious scholar, and her vast knowledge is very apparent here, as is the passion of her illustrator, Josh Baum, who's also a scribe. He's actually written a physical Torah before. And this isn't perhaps just for the Jews. Madonna had a Kabbalah phase. You could get this book from Madonna. I believe Los Angeles still has a Kabbalah phase going on. Lots of people ready for this book, besides the bat mitzvahs of this world. Highly recommended, beautiful book.
Okay, as we near the end here, this is The Star-Nosed Mole, an anthology of scented garden writing by Isabel Bannerman. This is an anthology of scented and sensual plant-related poetry and prose, following pretty much on the heels of the same author's previous highly praised title called Scent Magic. And Isabel Bannerman's latest is an organic blend of practicality and beauty, instruction and meditation. In the author's own words, while researching an article, I came across the adorable and preposterously unusual star-nosed mole, which has highly sensitive star-shaped fingers protruding from its nose as if invented by Edward Lear, and it catches and eats its prey quicker than almost any other living thing. The mole inspired me to rummage through discarded papers and deep, dark hard drive to fish out these friends. Put the text with images and share a sort of commonplace book.
Cuando estaba viendo Los Sopranos, Tony dijo que prefería el arte de la guerra al el príncipe de Machiavelli. Esa propaganda debería estar en la portada, but it's not. By which I mean to say, I was watching The Sopranos last week, and Tony said he actually preferred The Art of War to The Prince by Machiavelli, which unexpected for an Italian booster like Tony. I think that blurb should be on the cover. It's not. But to hammer again at Chris's point earlier, we are one of the biggest distributors of Spanish language literature in North America. If you want to go down that road with us, we've got catalogs galore for you. Just let us know if you want or need a Spanish language section. We can hook you up. Oh, we've also got John Boyne. Definitely not Spanish. Irish, actually, which is the exact opposite of being Spanish. Like you, I've been selling John Boyne's books for years, but unlike you, it's because I used to work for Other Press, which publishes a lot of his stuff in the US. He's got fans all over this country. We're going to keep calling out Becky at Book Bar, because Becky at Book Bar loves our books. Who do you think isn't revolutionary, Margaret? I don't know.
No, I was thinking you said Spain is the opposite of Ireland.
I guess I was just thinking cuisine. Sherry at Book Loft is also a fan. Michael at Rakestraw, Louisa at Book Passage. It's a long list. It probably includes somebody from almost every indie shop in the country. And this is a sharp little satire that follows the downfall of a family in the age of the smartphone. So you're probably going to read it with more than a little recognition if you're scrolling like Margaret, of yourself or somebody you know. But yeah, this and the Claire Massoud are of a kind in my mind. It's like these sharp little satires from major authors that we get to present this season.
Right, now we have I Always Wanted to Be Somebody by Althea Gibson. Althea Gibson, if you don't know, was the first Black person to ever win a Grand Slam title in tennis. She was an inspiration to people like Venus and Serena Williams and Billie Jean King, who wrote the foreword to this book. So this is a great book about an athlete that maybe people haven't heard of, but who they probably should have heard of. So this is a great one for your shelves. And finally, my favorite book of my life, Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible 2022. If you need anyone to drink any of these whiskeys with you, call me. I'll come drink them with you. I love this book. It's got a great, it's just a great smattering of whiskeys from all over North America.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everybody,
Thanks,
for
Linda.
sticking with us
Thanks,
this
y'all.
long.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
And you will be rewarded with a very healthy discount should you choose to order after seeing all these lovely books.
Real healthy.
I'm going to go through the chat notes and do any follow-up that we need to do. I'll get these to everybody here. So thanks so much, everybody. And
We'll send
hope
Rolling Stones care packs out, you know, the whole kit and caboodle.
we hope to see
And whiskey.
you on December 6th as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks very much.